They were like, "Are you an actor now?" I was like, "No, they just like they cast anybody."
What, you think all the Asian people look alike?
Yeah, and that's what I said. That's what I told them. I'm like, they're like, no, they're like, I was like, wait, just because he's Asian, so you think that's me? And
You're
they're like, no,
you're gaslighting all your
exactly.
friends. What are the Chinese comedians making of the Drake-Kendrick beef?
Oh my God.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tea Time with Jesse. I'm your host, Jesse, here today with Yi Jin Chun.
Yes.
Who's an actor, Canadian Chinese, and a friend of my agent Ike, who recommended that you were coming through for a short film festival.
Exactly, yeah.
And so I was like, why not have him on the podcast? It's really good to have you here. Why don't you give everybody a little quick introduction? Who are you?
Cool. So I want to give a shout out first because this is actually going to be my first podcast ever.
Oh wow, there we go.
Yeah.
So what does it feel like? Are you nervous? Are you excited?
No, like you've been great. So it's been like very welcoming. So that's been. I feel very relaxed. Comfortable. Yeah, I want to give a shout out to my mom, my dad, my sister, who else? My grandma who passed away this summer, so she's probably with Guanyin right now watching. My friends and other families and friends who don't know I'm acting, which we can discuss.
Okay. Is it a secret?
Kind of. So there's some friends that know I'm acting and some friends that don't because I want to surprise them.
Oh, okay.
And then also my wonderful girlfriend, Federica, and her family, who's probably going to be watching this in Italy. So.
Oh, that's amazing. Dude, I have to say, you're the first person who came on and dropped so many shout outs in the beginning of the show. I love it though. It's like, that's why we're here, man. We're here to have a good time with everybody. For you just let, my audience are all tea people. People who are interested in Chinese culture, people who are interested in tea culture, and people who are just here to have a good time and be able to learn about interesting new stuff. So we're going to start off today by making Sister I's Everyday Red Tea. The box is a little bit beat up because it's actually my own personal one I've been going through slowly. We get this from Yunnan.
Oh, okay.
So we have they're pressed into these little cakes. Yeah. And then this is Ancient Tree Red Tea.
Right.
And you can see here the...
Can I smell it?
Yeah, tea leaves are really nice there.
I don't really smell it.
So the actual like just plain tea oftentimes will have no scent.
Okay.
A lot of times the tea that's sold in the West has been like sprayed with fragrant oil, so it's like jasmine tea, but to make it smell really jasmine-y, they spray it with oil. Okay. But that actually is not as good as the actual fragrance of the tea once it's made. Once the tea gets hot, you'll actually be able to smell a little bit more of the tea scent. So. Just break off a little piece of this. And then the red tea is what in the West is called black tea. So if like the Lipton or whatever is a black tea, this is the sort of thing. Okay. But this is going to be better than that brand. Okay. I'm not sure what the rules are on YouTube, if they let me smash other brands or if I'm going to get blasted. I don't know. We're not here to bash them. We're here to enjoy.
Lipton tea is good.
The tea. No, we didn't. No, we didn't pay for a podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
They got to pay me if we're going to say that on the podcast. No, I'm just kidding. So the it's your first time in LA. What have you thought of LA so far?
So I arrived just 2 days ago, and so far it's been really nice. We went to Irvine. Yep. And then Newport Beach, Laguna Beach. Nice. Staying at a hotel in Torrance right now. Nice. And so far it's been, like the weather has been really, really nice. Actually, this morning there was an earthquake.
There was an earthquake this morning. Did you feel the earthquake?
I did. So I set my alarm for 7, and then I was like, okay, maybe I could smell. I can smell it now. Yeah. Really 7, nice. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll sleep in, and then for a little bit longer. And it's 7:30. The room started shaking, and I wasn't worried because I know like there's like earthquake, but I was like, oh, when is it gonna stop? Yeah. And then I checked my phone, and there's like you guys have Google alerts for earthquake as well. Thank you. And then that's my first earthquake experience actually. Nice. I think so.
Well, we all made it through. That is one of the things I sometimes think about is like, my parents actually were visiting San Francisco while my mom was pregnant with me, thinking about whether they should move to San Francisco, and they were looking for houses the day the earthquake hit, in the big earthquake that like wrecked San Francisco. And they were like, no, we're going to the East Coast. Like, we don't want to deal with this.
This deal with the cold rather than the earthquake.
Exactly. This first steep is a wash, so this allows us to open up the leaves. What's your kind of tea experience? Because I know you come from you say your Cantonese background.
Yeah, Cantonese background. So my mom's from Jiangxi.
Okay.
And then my dad's from Hong Kong.
Okay.
And then I was born and raised in Toronto. And So most of my tea experience is just going to have yum cha with my grandparents and family. So usually it's just like drinking bole, like pu'er, oolong, and what else? Like in Cantonese is gok fa cha, chrysanthemum.
Gui hua. Say mo li hua would be jasmine. Chrysanthemum is ju hua.
Ji hua.
Ju hua cha.
Okay, yeah. And that's basically, and then I'll drink it because, you know, growing up, I don't really drink tea or coffee much. So I don't really have like a tea
background.
Yeah, but just only for dim sum. Basically.
Well, welcome. Here you go. See what you like about this one.
Yes,
cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
That'd be good.
It's nice and light, right?
Yeah, so this is like, you know, light, sweet in the beginning, kind of more floral. As it opens up, it's going to even get darker.
So when you say open up, it means like when you keep pouring more.
Yeah, because so the tea leaf is, it's dried.
Yeah.
If you have a tea bag that's like all powder, then it'll instantly, like everything gets inundated at once. And so that's why they're kind of like over astringent, over punchy kind of, like it's not very well balanced. The actual tea leaves, when you have the whole leaf, it gets slowly inundated with the water. So the beginning and the second steep and the third steep and the fourth steep and the fifth steep, they all have this like progression.
Okay.
And so as we go through it, it's going to be changing subtly, going from kind of more light and sweet into darker and then kind of fading off again towards the end. So hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Yeah. Because usually when I drink tea, I'm like, oh, it's so bitter, like right off the bat.
Yeah, it shouldn't be bitter. Like like with a couple minor exceptions of teas that are like the calling card is being bitter. Most of the time, tea being bitter is a sign it's poor quality. And a lot of the tea that got to the West was brought there. And then it was bitter, and then we're like, oh, add milk, add sugar. And then people started adding milk and adding sugar, and the varietals of tea that grow best in the British colonies in India and Kenya and Sri Lanka, in those places were varietals that were more strong and more bitter to begin with. So in China, where it's more varietals that are kind of lighter and sweeter, generally, as you see, we're not adding any tea or milk or sugar. So
that's why I find it so strange when sometimes some of my friends, they drink tea with like, they add sugar. And I'm like, I've never had tea like that.
And I mean, there are people, I mean, obviously, like, you know, Taiwan, Hong Kong has like milk tea. And there's like, there are lots of different combinations. So it's not saying like, if you drink sugar in your tea, it's bad. It's like, but it is saying that the leaves, if you're going to be adding stuff in general, you don't need as much high quality stuff. It's almost like cocktails. It's like if you have really, really good whiskey, you don't like add Coca-Cola to it. Like there's a level of which where it's like, okay, this isn't the best whiskey, but it'll do totally fine as a mixer.
It's almost like Italian food, right? Like the simple ingredients, and then it's like fresh. You taste the freshness, like tomatoes and stuff.
So
understood.
Cheers. Here we go.
Cheers.
So you're from Toronto. And I got a chance to perform in Toronto, I'd say like 2 years ago.
I saw that.
It was a lot of fun. I did crosstalk with Dashan. If anyone knows Dashan, you can go check out the video blog I did of that. But I was amazed at how many Chinese people there were in Toronto. I knew there were a lot, but I didn't realize how many there were. What's the Chinese community like?
So recently, I actually saw like a YouTube video of like a Miami vlogger in Markham. And then that's when I started looking it up again. And Toronto, like the greater Toronto area, actually has the second largest Chinese population in North America.
Wow.
And actually, when I dug deeper, and I could be wrong about this, it actually has the second largest, maybe outside of Asia.
Wow.
First being New York.
Right, New
York.
I wouldn't doubt it.
And close second or like third would be like the LA area.
So it's basically, it's like Americans saying, oh, there's a lot of Chinese people in the LA area. Really, there's just as many, if not more, in Toronto.
In the Toronto area.
Also in a smaller country, like, you know, Canada doesn't have as, like, you know, the population isn't as big.
Yeah, exactly. Like in America, I think there's about 4.7 American Chinese, and there's like 1.7 million Canadian Chinese, but the population, like the ratio is like much higher in Canada. And also a big population out in Vancouver as well. So in Toronto, we have Markham, and in Vancouver, they have Richmond, which a lot of like Chinese people live. Most of the Chinese people in Toronto is like Cantonese people. Actually, they came in waves. In the very beginning, like in the 70s, most of the Mandarin-speaking people were from Taiwan. And then you have like a lot of like what we call low IQ from Guangdong area, like Chaoshan, that have lived in Canada for a long time. And then you have like the 70s, 80s of the Hong Kong people moving. And then when I was growing up in the 90s and 2000s, there were a lot more like middle class mainland Chinese moving to Toronto, mostly from like Tianjin. And then when I was in university, then you have like a bunch of like international students.
So it's a big mix.
It's a big mix, Whereas before it was like, okay, like it's like people from Taiwan, people from Hong Kong, or people from like Guangdong area. Now it's like, now when I meet people, there are people from Shandong, Yunnan as well, where we got the tea. So like, and Sichuan as well.
It's one of these things where like a lot of times friends of mine are like, oh, you speak Chinese, do you do like shows in Chinatown? And I was like, well, actually like the Chinatown Chinese in Boston are from this wave, and my audience is from that wave. And like, it gets really specific.
Because they just lump in, Chinese, so it's like they all speak like.
How much of what you just said would you say a non-Chinese Canadian knows? Like none of it, or
I think like, I think even a lot of Canadian-born Chinese don't really know. It's just that I'm very interested in Chinese culture, so I just like to research. And then whatever I research, I also send it to my friends to let them know. To make sure they're still in touch with their culture.
Re-educating.
Yeah, exactly. Just letting them know, like, hey, this is what's going on in China. This is what's going on in Hong Kong. Here's some fun things that I found on Douyin to show them.
Oh, that's fun.
And then just like telling them a bunch of stuff that's happening. And then also like when I visit my girlfriend in Italy, there's a huge Chinese population there as well.
Oh, you gotta let me know. I'm going to Italy in October. Like if I'm going to.
Oh, are you? Okay,
I don't know when this airs, but I may already be back by now. But
okay.
If I am already back, thank you. For the tips. Like, you know, we're not time travelers. No.
If you do go, there's someone I know who's Italian, who's very into Chinese cultures. Like she's very, and there's so you know, here we have in Toronto, there's a Markham. There's like a Markham in Italy outside of Florence called Prato. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I don't know.
So a lot of like the things that are made in like kind of like some of the high quality brands, they're actually a lot of them from what I've read, are made in Prato by Chinese people. So it's like made in Italy. Sometimes it's like
made
in
made in Italy. It's
by
still
Chinese.
made Chinese. Doesn't matter how deep you dig.
Yeah, exactly.
It's turtles all the way down.
So I got to meet her because I actually reached out to her through Instagram. I didn't know who she was, but I just saw some Italian person with just like, they call themselves China nerds.
Yeah, that's funny.
And just like, they don't get paid or anything. They just really love Chinese culture.
That's cool.
And then that's when I found out that Italy has like about 300,000 Chinese people.
That's a lot more than I thought there would be.
Right. And a lot of them are actually from Wenzhou.
Oh, okay.
Zhejiang.
That's cool.
Whereas in London, it's like Hong
Kong,
Cantonese.
yeah,
so it's just like such a huge
diverse.
Wenzhou
people. Claire, the leader of our Chinese department of the tea company, who is my friend from doing bilingual improv way back in the day, and now works for the tea company, is from Wenzhou.
Okay.
And it's funny, they have a joke actually about Wenzhou that I do in China, which is, it's funny, in China, the Wenzhounese are known as the Jews of China.
Oh, because they do business.
They do business. And so I have friends, like I went to Wenzhou, and people are like, oh, ni hui jia le. Like, oh, you're home. I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know like where this came from, but.
Wenzhou, and also a lot of Fujian, because I think they're by the coast, right? So it's easy for them to travel and do business, Well,
so what makes you as sort of a, you know, your parents were from mainland and then from Hong Kong, and then you were born in Canada.
Exactly,
So you would call yourself second generation or first generation?
So second generation.
Okay.
I thought I was first generation until people from like Korean who were the ones who told me in university, no, you're considered second gen because you're first gen is the immigrants.
So second gen. So of this generation, like what is what is the level of knowledge about China that people have? Does it go from like absolutely none to like very much still tied in, or how does it go?
You have such a like diverse kind of range. I would say me and a few others are kind of like in a minority who really know. And I think I'm also in a minority for one that was born in outside of China, because you have some that were maybe born in China who came when they were like 5 or 6, who have more knowledge about like China. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but like among my friend group, I'm the one that really still stays connected, because I think I went to Mandarin classes.
Yeah, you had like Chinese school.
Chinese school, and I was forced to do it, which is I really appreciate my parents for really.
Oh, it's good. It's good you came out of that with a good mentality. Because I know people that have done the opposite. Same with Jewish people. Like there's a Hebrew school.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to learn how to read and write. Although it's harder in Chinese to learn how to read and write because of the characters.
Right.
But it is a lot of work, and it's you know, the funniest thing now is because I have this audience online of people that know me as like a Chinese performer.
Right.
I actually get invitations sometimes from Chinese schools to come and talk to the kids and get them hyped about learning Chinese. And I'm like, the world is so twisted now. They're calling in the white guy to get the Asian, American or Canadian children hyped about learning Chinese.
Yeah, but hey, like they're probably like, hey, if he does it, you guys have to learn it. Exactly.
You got to be able to do it. So. It's an interesting thing. What is it like in Chinese school? Like, portal yourself back to being a kid. How old were you? What do you have to do in Chinese school?
Right. So the Chinese school I went to was actually taught by people from Taiwan.
Okay.
So I had to learn Zhuyin Fuhao, you know, but that was so difficult for me to learn. Even now, I still don't really know how to use it.
Explain what Bopamofa is to people that don't know.
So it's kind of like a system that Taiwan developed in order to recognize traditional Chinese characters, and even also it's like a phonetic way to like speak the characters.
Yeah.
And there's like 3 on the side of the Chinese characters that have like that allows you to pronounce the words.
Yeah.
From what I remember,
it
could be something.
It's like in Japanese they have like kanji, which are the characters, but then they also have katakana, which is the other 2, the sounding out of the thing.
Exactly, yeah. And so I was put into it in since kindergarten. So when I was 4 years old, me and my sister, we were through it till about maybe when I was in grade 8. That's when we stopped. And in between, I went to like a different, also by another Taiwan teacher. And that's when she taught me Hanyun Pinyin.
Yeah, Pinyin.
And I was like, Pinyin is so much easier. Ni hao, N-I-H-A-O. And I was like, that's brilliant. And I didn't realize that at the end, that's what the mainland people use is the Pinyin. And Taiwan people don't, of course, some would know, but that's not
They
common.
use the Wade Giles. It's like, it's a deep stew. Some people asked about this. They were asking me, why is pu'er sometimes spelled P-U-E-R-H, and other times it's P-U
with the
apostrophe E-R. And this is because like throughout the history of China, like they've always struggled to like, how do we modernize but also keep the characters?
Exactly.
And ironically, it took until the computer to really figure that out because you should, if you've never seen old Chinese typewriters, search up Chinese character typewriters. They're the size of like, you know, boardroom tables and they have like thousands of characters on them. And that was like, people made all sorts of attempts to be able to use the characters.
Wow, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, oh, it's crazy. Like they have like each die, like we have A, B, C. They have like each character. And you need to remember where you stored each of the characters, crazy, and there's whole like, you know, boxes of metal dies, and one of these things takes up a room. It's crazy.
And that's why they like for the longest time I was like Peking and then Beijing, and I'm like, which one is? And I thought maybe because Peking is closer to Cantonese Bucking. So I was like, maybe that's why it's like they use Peking. But the Wade Giles.
It's a thing. So the Pinyin and Wade Giles. Anyway, all of this stuff is to say, like, I think a lot of people like don't recognize how hard it is to keep that going in a second generation. Like I see, I know a couple American families that, you know, people that met in China, they had kids in China, they raised essentially American kids in China, for lack of a better term. It's hard to know what you call them. Here we have Chinese Americans, they don't have American Chinese.
Yeah, because it would be like, wait, is he Chinese?
Well, so that's sort of similar thing, and it was, you know, it's you look and you think about it like, oh, how would you raise an American kid in China if you really want them to be American still? What does that mean? But this is a regular, everyday occurrence for Asian families that come over to Canada or to America. Do you feel like your family, it was very important to them that you remain Chinese?
Yes, so they wanted to make sure, well, first of all, they wanted to make sure I'm Canadian as well to assimilate with the Canadian culture and stuff. Also, I noticed it tasted like different now.
Yeah, it's getting darker. It's getting kind of more body in the tea.
It's like stronger in a way too, right?
Yep, more punchy. There's a little mustiness in there. That's the ancient tree mustiness.
Okay.
A lot of depth to it. But yeah.
Like they want to make sure I'm Canadian, so I did get to experience like, you know, being like what a typical Canadian would experience. But also it was very important for me to be Chinese as well. And actually when I was in Chinese school, the Taiwan teachers, it wasn't so later on that I realized the book that I was reading was actually talking about like being proud to be Chinese as well. I still remember the very first book in grade 1 that we had to, the first page was like, it said 我是中国人，我是海外的中国人，我爱中国，我也爱本地的国家。
Oh wow!
And at the time I didn't know anything what was happening, and then the picture was a picture of an island and then like a bigger island and of the Chinese kids waving to each other. And then I was like, oh, and that's why at the time I just thought it was Chinese. I didn't know there were teachers from like Taiwan, but they were trying to make sure that we still remembered our Chinese roots and identities and stuff for Mandarin.
It's interesting. It's like the more I speak to Chinese people, the more I relate as a Jewish person. Like Jews have also, you know, up until 1949, didn't have a homeland for 2,000 years.
Right.
And so the entirety of being Jewish was being Jewish while also being somewhere else, where other people were not like you.
Right.
And a lot of the traditions kind of emerged, you know, over thousands of years of like every different, the Jews in Spain did it one way, and the Jews in Eastern Europe did it one way, and the Jews in Ethiopia did it another way, and there were Jews in India, and there were everywhere.
Because I read there's like Ashkenazi, there's like different.
There's all sorts of different Jews.
I thought before I like dove deep into it, you know, when you go to Wikipedia, you click.
There's been some Wikipedia holes
and I'm like,
dug into.
Wow, there's so many different like groups, and then so
so I think it's similar, like, you know, that's why it's, you know, we've had Chinese Americans on the show before, but we haven't had any Chinese Canadians, and it's kind of always curious to see where it's similar and where it's different, because that question of how do you be one thing while not giving up being a second?
Right, and that's why I think the biggest, there's a difference between, I feel, Chinese Americans and Chinese Canadians is that, and it's not just Chinese Americans, Canadians, I think it's like ethnic Americans and ethnic immigrant Canadians, is that a lot of Canadians who are like Indian, Chinese, or whatever, they still are connected to their roots more, I find, than like America. Because once you're American, it's like a melting pot, right? They're like more American than they feel Chinese, from my perspective. Whereas in Canada, we're still very like, oh no, we still feel more like equal, like Canadian and Chinese, or Canadian and Indian, or Canadian and Polish or something.
Yeah, it's more of like a dual dual identity.
Yeah, exactly.
So the when you were younger, like, did that cause problems for you? Like, you didn't know, like, how much should I assimilate with the other Canadians? How much should I only hang out with the Chinese people?
So there was like sometimes like when I meet other Chinese Canadians, sometimes I'll be like when some of them are not very connected to like being Chinese and stuff like that, I felt a little weird about that. I'm like, but you're Chinese, shouldn't you know how to like not speak the language, but at least understand the culture more, or be proud to be Chinese, kind of in a way. And they just were not very like, they didn't really care in a way about the culture aspect, which I found maybe it was something that my parents really instilled into my sister and I. Because my dad was very into Chinese history, culture, and then my mom was also, in a way, very proud to be Chinese. Because no matter what, they're like, you need to know how to speak your language. And they would use like the example, like even like Jewish people, they would know how to speak Hebrew.
My Hebrew is not as good, but it's a
like they would be the culture.
But the culture, and I feel it's ironic. I'm on the opposite side of that, where like I've always wanted to learn Hebrew better, and it was in high school I even took like a little Hebrew class outside of school at like a local college or whatever. It's always been on my goal. And then even after I moved to China and I learned Chinese, it's still in the back of my head like, well, if I learn Chinese, I can definitely learn Hebrew. There's an alphabet, you know, this is not going to be as difficult, and yet it hasn't happened. So you
just need something to like, there has to be something where you can like spend, because you need time to be able to like sit and like,
you need time, but also there needs to be reason. And I think that's part of the biggest challenge when I like those parents are like, oh, like get my son hyped about learning Chinese. And I'm like, well, to some degree, you need to show them why it's going to be.
What's the benefit?
Yeah, what's the benefit? Like why, if you think it's important that the second generation children speak the language.
Exactly. Yeah.
But why? Because if you can't,
if parents cannot tell the kids, then why should the kids, you know?
Yeah, why should the kids care?
Exactly.
And so it's like a lot of times, like the parents, I think, really feel strongly about it, but they just haven't thought through. So like, but for you, it sounds like, history,
I was very fortunate. Exactly. My
food,
dad, my dad was like, hey, in the future, I remember the conversation when I was a kid. He was like, you need to, because my sister and I were like not wanting to learn Chinese, and also because the method of teaching us back then was hey, you got to memorize, like my dad would, you got to memorize this.
It's not much better. It's still grindy to learn.
Yeah, exactly. It's very grindy. And then my dad would be like, hey, like we're crying. He's like, no, you got to learn it. And it's just very like, not a pleasant experience. Of course, that's the only way he knew. So I can't fault him for that. And if he didn't do that, then I wouldn't be able to speak it now, right? And obviously, I still have a lot of work to do in both Mandarin and Cantonese. He taught me Cantonese because he was like, I'm going to teach you Cantonese, but I don't want you to learn my Guangdong Korean, right? Really? So that's why. And then my mom speaks good Mandarin, like fluent, but she also didn't want to teach us something wrong. That's why they pushed us into Mandarin school. And so my dad, the one thing he said that, hey, China one day is going to be strong. You need to know the language, and that's why. And that was always in the back of my head, and so that's why I was like, okay, I guess that's like one of the motivation. Okay, whatever that meant. China being strong, I don't know what that meant culturally, economically, politically. I'm not sure.
But it was enough for you as a kid. You're like, oh, this is bigger than me and my family.
Exactly,
exactly. Like, it's a thing. Like I need to know this for bigger reasons than just like being able to go to the store, which I can do in English.
Exactly. And you had to trust, like as a kid, you had to kind of trust that your parents would be the one to guide you in a way. And luckily,
that's interesting. So maybe what we've learned is, and I don't have any kids, and I assume you don't have any kids.
No, I don't have any kids either.
Is as a parent, giving parenting advice as people that don't have children, either give your kids very specific reasons that they will use language, or incredibly vague geopolitical ones. Either one of them might work. Throw it against the wall.
Because the thing is, if it wasn't for him doing that, I wouldn't be able to even book the role that I have right now. Because I didn't study acting, didn't do any acting for like my whole life. It was just maybe the past 3 years, 4 years. I just want to explore Toronto. I really I love Toronto, the city. I was born and raised there. I love the people in it, and I'm like, I like to explore different areas that maybe I've never seen before. And through acting, I was like, oh, this is the film studio. I didn't know that. I walk by here all the time.
Places.
Exactly. I just want to explore the city more, and because being able to speak the language, I was able to book some roles. One was a student film where I had to speak Cantonese, and in this short film, I had to speak Mandarin.
Wow.
So even though it's just like a couple lines, but
that gives you a big advantage to actually be able to speak it.
And if I didn't have that, maybe I wouldn't have booked it, and I wouldn't be in LA right now.
Nice. You know what's really funny is like, I kind of took a look back at my life and I was like, I didn't plan it to be this way, but in LA, I'm basically part of the Chinese immigrant community.
Right,
like all the people I know are like Chinese immigrants.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If I had this realization, it's like, if I didn't meet you in high school or college, I don't know any Americans that didn't live in China, because like everybody lived in China. Even today, after this shoot, I have a friend of mine who lived in Beijing for many, many years. He's coming over. We're eating lunch.
Right.
And like, I didn't know that, like, these are the people I know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So,
and that's the thing too, like even in high school, because when I was, I realized like my high school was very diverse. And at the time you just think we're all just like, we don't ask about the background or anything. Yeah. And it wasn't until I went to university and started traveling, I'm like, man, I think back, there's a lot of diverse, like my classmates are very diverse. It would be so interesting to know their background, their story.
How did it all happen?
How did it all happen? How did it get there? How did we all end up in the same place? Like there's something.
I think that generation, that first immigrant generation, oftentimes those stories never get told.
Yeah.
Because it's like they come over and like, and it's a different thing. But I did the same thing going over to China and spending a decade there. And it's like, oh, if I wasn't like a comedian, no one's asking about your story. It's like, you're like, you're an English teacher, right? It's like, maybe not. But like everybody would just assume this very basic, simplistic idea about why you're there. And like, as an American that lived overseas, every single Westerner that came to China had some sort of very interesting story.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And it's actually the same way over here, except that a lot of times those immigrants, I think mostly because of the English level not being there, just like you need a translator to get into that story.
Exactly.
And so there's, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit with the film. But so we're going to be drinking this. This is show pu'er.
Show pu'er, okay.
So the show pu'er is cooked pu'er. If you have like dim sum, restaurants, a lot of them like to have this except that this will be a lot richer because one, the tea quality is better. This is my friend Dui Dui's 2010 reserve, so it's aged 2010, 14 years now.
Oh, so you can also age it kind of like wine.
Yep, it ages like wine. They pack them into cakes like this over here, and then you can age them in the cakes, or you can age them loose.
Is there a scent as well?
This one will be a little musty, darker, but it's not.
It's earthy.
Yeah, earthy. The flavors are going to be very earthy. The other thing is that when you have dim sum, usually they are re-steeping those leaves so many times that it's like weaker. But I actually like that with the dim sum because you have food. You don't need a rich, big tea to go with your food. But drinking tea by itself, we'll see what you think about this this one right here.
Cool.
So as we're preparing this tea, tell me a little bit about the film that you're in and why it was important for you to act in this film.
So this is one of the first short films that I did, and we filmed it 2 years ago. It's basically, it was important to me because it was like the first group. The story is the Qing Dynasty sent a group of Chinese students to America, to Hartford.
There you go.
Yeah, smells like the dim sum restaurant.
Yeah, exactly.
To Hartford, Connecticut, in order to educate a select group of Chinese students to learn like American science, technology things, and it's based on a true story. Thank you. And then, and then basically the students, they got used to American way of life in a way.
So what kind of year would this be?
This would be like 1880s.
Okay.
1880s.
So a group of Chinese that went over to America in the 1880s.
Yes, exactly.
And what is the story around? It's around their life and experience in America.
And then eventually the lead, which is me, kind of like rebels against like a Qing official coming to like test what he's learned, and just like the lead, just like almost like intertwined with like a story of like a kid growing up in a way. So there's like a younger version of my character, and then there's my character, and it's like a 15-16 minute long short film. And the director managed to actually get like really legit costumes, like
that's great.
Qing Dynasty stuff, some scrolls,
I did an episode, I don't know if it's aired by the time this comes out, but I had a traditional Beijing storytelling, like Pingshu performer come over. And so he had his traditional robe with him, and I was like, I have a traditional robe as a Xiangsheng performer. So we did the whole episode in the robes, and I just love that. It's very comfortable. It's I actually like that
because it's airy too. There's like a lot of room.
and there's a pocket in there, which is like now I assume it's a cell phone pocket, but you always got to have a pocket. So what was the most interesting thing about inhabiting a Qing Dynasty Chinese person coming over?
So my character is almost I had like the queue. But I was dressed in Western clothing.
Okay.
So I was like in like the 3-piece kind of thing. So it was cool because it's almost like if I was born in Canada or the U.S., North America, 100 years ago, this would be maybe be like me. So it was just like cool to be in like in that time period how I would be like back then, and then probably having to straddle two vastly different cultures, and the expectation and pressures that I don't have as a Canadian Chinese in current day, right?
But back then it was much more stark. I mean, this group of people, there were a group of scholars that went over in the 1800s as the Qing Dynasty was kind of reforming itself, and questions like, will it survive to the modern day? How is it going to happen? By the way, cheers. Enjoy the tea.
Cheers, thank you.
Let me know what you think of this. Very nice, very earthy.
I feel like this one's a bit stronger than the previous one.
Yeah, this one is darker, earthier, woodier,
very similar to what I have in dim sum, but more, much more punch to it.
So it's like if this by the 20th steep will taste pretty similar to what you have in the thing. So like in the restaurant, they keep steeping. Again, I actually think that it's better, a little weaker if you're eating it with food.
Because then you don't want the strong tea taste.
Yeah, it's like it's too much. But this is definitely a tea where you make this sort of tea at home and you're like, I'm having tea now. It's not like a little sweetness and like blah blah. It's like
you're having tea. You're setting everything up. It's like a whole experience.
It's a thing. So. So the that era of Qing Dynasty scholars coming over to the States, I have a lot of connection with as well, because one of those people was Lao She. So Lao She was an author and an intellectual and a playwright who he studied in England. He came back to China and he founded the Laoshe Tea House, which is the most famous place to perform traditional Chinese comedy.
Right. Yeah.
So like at the tea house there, to be able to have the people that went abroad and came back did very interesting things. I know Tsinghua University was founded by another Chinese from the Qing Dynasty who had studied abroad. So these people. It was, coming back into China and explaining what they saw.
Right.
And the things that they did, which were radically different, starting a Western-style university.
Right. Yeah.
Like these sorts of things were as a result of what they saw on these trips.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what did they see when they came to Connecticut in the 1880s? Like, what was their experience like?
So in our short film, one of the lead, the younger version, was learning how to play baseball.
Oh, that's fun.
So that was cool, like that cultural exchange. I liked how the director, who also wrote the script, his name's Eric Chen. I like that he incorporated that.
Yeah.
And then other things like he incorporated was like the racism element, like grabbing the white kid grabbing the cue, and like what you look like a girl, things like that.
Cue, by the way, people don't know, is the braided hair from the Qing Dynasty.
Exactly.
Long braided hair.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a mix of all those experiences together.
Yeah.
And then again, tell me about your character and where they were in the story.
So my character was basically so I start off in the film just like learning, studying like American things. So my character also had a mentor based on a real character named Yong Wing, who actually was, I think, one of the first graduates in the US, like a Chinese American. And he's the one who kind of like guides me through the whole living in America, and eventually me kind of like rebelling, or the character rebelling against the examination officials. Yeah, so
look at how dark that is.
Yeah,
that's very dark. This gets pretty intense.
So if it's darker, is it kind of like heaty as well? You know the concept.
It's actually a good question. I want to say this is cooling, but I actually am not 100% sure. I know that there's a lot of Chinese medicine involved in terms of what the tea does and doesn't do to your body, but I'm not as advanced in knowing that.
True.
Actually, people ask me a lot of times, like, oh, what does this do? What does that do? And because I'm not a TCM doctor, I don't get into that as much. But cheers.
Cheers.
I will say that this is, not FDA-approved medical advice, but I feel like this tea, and many people I know that the kuk pu'er is good for your stomach. It helps the digestion.
Right.
If you've had a lot of spicy food or a lot of fatty food, like it was one of the reasons why it's served with dim sum. Fried stuff, whatever, the oily stuff. This, the jiani, like it helps with the digestion of the fatty foods and the oil and the heat.
Because I know green tea is more cooling.
Yeah. And so, it'd be interesting. I should get some expertise on that.
True.
But yeah, so being in this film, to be able to go back into that time period, did you feel like a kinship with this character from 100 years ago, where like you had to go through learning how to be, in both places, and the character's also going through the same thing?
Exactly. Like. Yeah, like like being able to still, how do you retain your roots while still trying to assimilate to like the new culture? It's very kind of like similar to how when I was still navigating what does it mean with my identity as a Chinese Canadian growing up. So yeah, I felt like I was able to pull into real life experience in order to play the character in that sense. And I always feel a kinship everywhere I go. When I travel, I always try to find like a Chinese restaurant. And I always try to find something that's culturally Chinese in order to feel what it was like back then. Like even if I was like when I go to Europe, especially when I went to London or when I went to the Netherlands, and I bring my girlfriend around, she was always fascinated that I would always want to try a Chinese food, a Chinese restaurant. And I always want to talk to the people because that's where I feel the kinship.
Yeah.
Just to ask them, hey, where are you from? And then let them know, because maybe they're all Wenzhou people, maybe all Fujian people. Then I'm like, I'm 我是中国我是加拿大华人 right but I'm also Cantonese so then let them see maybe they haven't seen a Cantonese person before
exactly.
right so I feel a kinship there as well so yeah whether it's playing a character or traveling I'll always try to find something culturally Chinese or when I'm in Zurich I went to a Chinese restaurant and actually my girlfriend wanted to eat Chinese food because she's got so used to the variety of like dishes especially there's a lot of like Thai right like gailan, Chinese broccoli and all that stuff that she is begging me when she comes to Toronto to eat Chinese
she's
food.
Like, oh, I mean, and there's good Chinese food.
And there's good Chinese food as well, yeah.
What's Chinese food like in Zurich?
So that's a good question. So again, the Chinese food in Europe, I feel like minus the UK, is mostly like non-Cantonese food. But Switzerland is so expensive though. So
it's expensive.
It's so expensive.
That's the other thing. Even here in America, like there's really good Chinese food in the San Gabriel Valley and Irvine. But part of my head is still stuck because I lived in China for 10 years. I'm like, I know how much this should cost.
Yes.
Of course, you're paying for their rent and blah blah blah. It's like there's reasons. It's not like you're being extorted, but it's like. Oh, this doesn't have to be so expensive.
Yeah.
Why is it so expensive?
So it's actually not. So the restaurant I went to was actually not bad. So how I usually just check the reviews, look at the pictures, and then that's how I decide. And usually I get it pretty accurate. And it was actually not bad. Like the food that they had was actually pretty good. Like if I had to live in Zurich, I'd be like, okay, I'll be able to survive going to this restaurant and stuff. But they're not that. Of course, they're not that many.
Is it kind of like in America, we have like American Chinese food? Do
I
they have
see what
like
you're saying.
European Chinese food?
No, I think it's still very Chinese.
Okay.
But I have to say, in Italy, you know how like when you go to like eat Italian food, it's like good quality, it's like small portions, right?
Yeah.
Like pasta is like made like with a lot of like labor but then it's like small portions. I feel like they do the same thing with Chinese food.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I'm
used to this big plate of stuff.
Yeah, so it's like the food that you get like in Toronto or Vancouver where it's like a big takeout, portion. Yeah. They take that, they make it like, they shrink it to fit like the nice plates, and then they charge you
like twice as much.
and I'm like, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like when I went, that was kind of my experience when I went to Japan. They would serve me like very reasonable portions of food, and I'd get upset. I was like, this is totally reasonable. And I lived in China and America, two places where they give you too much food.
Yeah.
And I was like, now I'm seeing like a reasonable person should eat this and be happy, and I'm not happy.
But the thing is, in Italy, I feel like the Chinese food is unreasonable. Like it's still unreasonable. How could you, like a basic fried rice that you can cook in like a few minutes, and then they make it like just like in this bowl, and then they charge you the same amount as like
I have a thing against fancy bowls. I'm if you've picked the bowl for the food, you've thought about this too much.
Right.
Like, and I'm not going to get that extra value. I'm such a cheapo. So I'm like, I'm always looking for that.
I'm looking for the value as well.
For the value.
So that's when people ask me about like, is this food good? I'm like, okay, wait, we have to explain like
what is good.
What is good?
What like you had
the
a
price?
Philosophical immediately.
Exactly.
Like,
is it the price point? Like I could eat like chain pizza. Because depending on the price, if it's on sale, like if it's like at like half off or something, then that's how I start like comparing, right? Like obviously New York style pizza in New York or Domino's. If Domino's is like 50 or 70% off, I'm gonna eat the Domino's more often than eat New York style pizza.
Exactly.
But New York style pizza is still like the best to me,
So as somebody who has experience getting Chinese food all over the world, what do you look for to be able to tell whether a Chinese restaurant is legit?
Ooh, that's a very, very, very good question. I think the pictures. I have to look at the pictures. I look at, because sometimes it's hard to judge from like the outside now. Because sometimes, like, you know how they say it has to be a rundown place for it to be good? That might not be the case. Right? You might get food poisoning.
Or especially in LA, there's a lot of prosperous Chinese here. They have good restaurants. Like, it's not like, oh, it has to have been started by an immigrant in the 80s or else it's not good anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So pictures, what do you look for in the pictures?
Pictures, I look at how it like, kind of like the quality, how the color looks, the amount of oil that you can see like on the plate.
You don't want huge
amount of oils. What they serve as well. But yeah, it's almost like you have to get a feel for it to really know. And that's why, because sometimes, like for example, if you look at like xiaolongbao, right? Sometimes I look at a picture and like, not just me, a lot of people can tell if it's like good or not, if it's like very doughy and stuff.
You want the xiaolongbao, the really thin.
Thin enough, but not too thin that it breaks.
Yeah.
So like my girlfriend will send it to me, and I'll look, and I'll be like, okay, this one seems good. But again, sometimes I could be wrong as well.
You can't ever be perfect about this.
Yeah.
A lot of people ask me similar things about tea. They're like, oh, is this tea good? And they show me a picture. I'm like, I mean, ultimately, you really have to try it.
You have to try it, yeah.
You know, I can give you some basic ideas. Like if it's ground up into a powder, I can be like, it's probably not going to be good.
Right.
If it's in a tea bag, it's like, it's not to say you can't get good tea in a tea bag, but the fact it's in a tea bag means they made it for the Western drinkers, and the fact that they knew they were doing that means there's an unbelievable desire to cheat and give bad tea because no one will ever know.
Yeah, so you already know like that's like the first test, and it might not be 100% accurate, but that's like the first test.
Even the best, like the fanciest brand in a supermarket ultimately knows they're selling to the type of people who get their tea from a supermarket.
Right, exactly.
So it's like, it's very different from like a place like mine, which I suppose would be a specialty store. But it's like, all I do is tea, and it's not even that like tea. It's like Camellia sinensis, Liu Da Cha Lei, like the main 6 types of tea. And you know, I have from like, you know, China, Taiwan, but it's all the sort of Chinese tea tradition. So it's like, I mean, even potentially if I were to do, you know, other types of tea, like I'm also would be learning in that case. But yeah, if somebody sends me just a picture of the tea, I'm oftentimes not able to do
exactly. So I just tell, I'm like, okay, I feel like this is the right one. So usually it's just pictures. Pictures. If it's a place I don't know, I just look at the pictures, and then you look at how many people.
Are there any dishes that you're like, if they serve that, that's a good sign?
Okay, that's dishes. Because usually I'll get like gailan, jialan, and then I'll look at like the meat dish. I think even though this is very a North American Chinese dish, gulu yok, you know, sweet and sour pork. If they cook it well, then I'm like, okay, then that's good. That's good. Yeah.
It's a good sign.
And then also like chongbao niuro. If they cook it well, if there's enough like amount of beef, then I'm like, okay, then that's a good sign. Yeah.
For me, it's like there's a restaurant here that does shengjian bao, the pan fried bao, and like. That is such a unique dish. In the States, it's just starting to get to the place you can find it. At this point, if I see a restaurant that has that, I'm like, I trust all the other food now. Because you need this like very specialized giant cast iron in order to make them. And it's not a dish that like Westerners know about and are asking for. True. So it's like, if they're making that, it's because they believe the local Chinese community wants it.
I actually should rephrase that, because that's probably for Cantonese cuisine. Like for me, like to judge Cantonese cuisine. And then if I was to judge like other parts, it would be like, trying the xiaolongbao. Or like if I'm trying like a dim sum place, it's trying their luobu gao. And trying their xiajiao.
The xiajiao.
And then
if you have bad xiajiao, it's like, that's a bad sign.
And
you know people are going to order that.
Exactly. And usually I will never get xiaolongbao at a Cantonese dim sum place. It's usually not good. It's usually like thick, or you know, I would have to get it from like a Shanghai Dianxin restaurant.
Exactly.
You know?
So like a lot of this is like, I think partially to survive, like a lot of these restaurants are like, well, we have to do all the Chinese cuisine.
Right.
And it's kind of, I think it's one of the things actually now that I've started doing cultural food stuff. I never expected to be a food vlogger. And even to some degree now, like I guess it is technically what I do, but I don't think of myself that way. But but like one thing that I recognized weirdly enough is what people are missing now is not the breadth, because there's so many options.
Exactly.
They're missing the depth.
Exactly.
They're saying, okay, great, you have green tea, but do you have like 6 types of green tea from different mountains, from different things? And like, I do. And why the number, or like for instance, we have 4 spring green teas that are being sold right now, but we don't have 12 and we don't have 1.
Yeah, you just do the 4 really, really well.
Yeah, it's like, 4 for me was like, I know the farmers, I can actually get it directly from them. 12 is like, I don't know 12 green tea farmers.
Right.
Like, for me, the number 4 made sense because it was what I was able to do, and it's somewhat reasonable. Also, I feel like we also have too much choice in our days many times. Like, if my job is helping people pick the good teas, then I need to not select 18 different
because I trust that the ones that you picked are going to be the ones that
I'm the hope. Like. The hope is like, I've trying to done that for you. So sometimes people are like, do you have recommendations for stuff that is not on your shop? And I'm like, on one hand, I understand this idea. It's like, oh, there are great teas that are not in my shop. I'm not saying I have the only good teas in the world, but it's like I don't have recommendations because I don't know the farmers. I didn't go there. I didn't do their whole supply chain check.
Exactly,
I don't know how it was shipped, how it was sealed, how it was packaged.
Right.
Like these are. It sounds wacko, but that's the standard I had for myself when I lived in China.
Yeah.
If I just get like some random, like I wouldn't go on Taobao as a tea drinker in China and buy tea off of Taobao.
Yeah.
I would go to the tea market and I would know the people who are making it, or at least the guy who owns the shop that knows the farmers.
Yeah.
And it's obviously very difficult to do that in the West,
Yeah.
which is part of the reason why you guys have come to me. But it's like, just because it's difficult to do in the West doesn't mean it's not the right way to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
you know?
Yeah.
And so a lot of the times with food and culture and even with arts and entertainment, it kind of goes along with that.
But you're right, yeah, like now people are trying to get like the more authentic experience instead of, you know, trying to get everything.
Yeah,
you know,
and so with the more authentic experience, sometimes people are like, oh, do I have to do the whole tea table thing? It's like, no, but I would be wrong to not advise you to do it.
Right. Yeah.
Because like, yeah, you can drink it in a mug, and I have a video about my very basic technique. I say, if you have nothing else to make tea, 2 mugs, leaves in 1 mug, steep in there, pour the liquid into another, drink from here while you keep the leaves there. Now you can re-steep in there.
Right.
If you have 2 mugs, you can make tea pretty well, even without a pot. It'll be messy, you'll spill a little, but it doesn't matter. But I can't tell you like, you're going to get the best experience off of it. You just throw it in a mug and you leave it there for, like, it'll be good. It'll still be better than what you have. But in order to access authenticity, you need to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and so it's like, and so I think that people are getting a little bit braver now out in the market of saying, we will make you authentic Chinese food, but it's going to taste a little different than you expect.
And I feel like that's what happened in Toronto, because for a long time, I remember as a kid finding like a proper Chinese restaurant. Not that it was difficult. It's just that we always have to like know through word of mouth which restaurant's good. Yeah. But then but it's not just Chinese restaurant. I felt like a lot of different ethnic cuisine, Thai food, Vietnamese food. Indian food. Indian food. Over the past 15 years, it started. I think as more people in Toronto, Canada, Vancouver, they all start traveling and they start coming back. They want the more authentic food, and then the chefs actually knew how to make the food. It's just that the palate for the local residents weren't ready for it. So now Toronto has really good Thai food, really good Indian, Cantonese, and now before it used to be a lot of Cantonese restaurants. Now you have like Chuan Cai, a lot of different regions of China, Guoqiao, Mixian, Yunnan coming to Toronto that didn't really exist when I was younger. And then like Indian restaurants, and even New York style pizza has been coming to Toronto, so now I don't have to like fly to New York to get it. So it's just so many, like a wide range and very, very good cuisines. And
the cool thing about it is, I think like this is in my mind what good cultural exchange looks like. It's not that the chefs got better, it's that the people who are not in the community were more open-minded.
Exactly.
It's like once you have people like, if whatever, the Chinese chef is like, this is what I would make for my family at home, but I don't think you will like it. And then I think there is a step that needs to be taken by the chef to at least put it on the menu. Yeah. Because otherwise people don't know. They can't ask and be proactive about like, what do you have that I don't know about? It's really hard question to answer. But at the same time, like the main thing is people just don't feel like it'll be real. Like I know so many people in the West that they really love Chinese tea. And then they're like, but Americans don't drink it. Right. So I need to make peach oolong. Yeah. And they wouldn't drink peach oolong themselves, but they think that the other people will. And so they make peach oolong, and there's a bajillion peach oolongs, and there's nothing wrong with peach oolong, but like the reason why they're doing the thing is kind of getting diluted. Yeah. And then the result of it is when people like the peach oolong, they say, well, what's next? And then they don't have what's next because they already gave up on what they liked in order to get more attention and be more accessible. And so my take on this has been, the tea is going to be exactly the tea that I want to drink. Yeah. But, and the equipment even, I use the traditional equipment. But the methodology of how I share this, I can make this very accessible. We can do a podcast. Like we can do stuff that it makes it easy in the media. I shoot short videos. Like I'm not asking people to say you have to meditate 30 minutes to drink tea. But people do that though in the West, is they're like, you have to be incredibly mindful in order to drink tea. And I think tea is mindful, but I'm not helping this thing by saying like either you meditate half an hour when you drink the tea or else you can't drink it.
I feel like once they discover something, they go a little too far with it.
Yeah,
they make it the whole personality and say, hey, it's just normal. Like,
or it can be, but it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be.
And a lot of that comes from being willing to say, what culturally am I willing to change to fit into the new place? Would you have to change something? And what culturally do I refuse to change? Because the moment I change it, I'm not really doing what I came here for.
Exactly.
Do you feel like, going a little bit back to acting, what did it mean to you to have a Chinese director for a movie like this? Like, do you feel like this is, it's like, this story never even would have been written without that director?
It wouldn't have been written. I think if it wasn't for him, it's because it's like, it might be maybe he might have a totally different idea, but for him, he was able to find this story, like an American Chinese story. So it was very, very, very specific. So yeah, without him, I don't think this short film would have been made at all. And so I was very fortunate and very hoping that I was able to book this role, because at the time I was unrepresented. I was still trying to build up my demo, my credit and everything, and that was the first year I was acting, and I was just online looking for like casting calls.
Oh, nice. And so you dug it up.
I dug it up. Like I found it exactly, and then I found it on the website. I sent him. I submitted it. And then, he got back to me. And then after like a month, then we were already starting to shoot. So I was very fortunate because I'm like, this story, I've watched TV series that are like this, like maybe made in China. And for that to be filmed in Canada, I was like, it was very strange. So that's why everything was just, I had to really vet it to make sure it's like,
you're like, this is too good.
Like, I was like, why is this Chinese guy making a very specific story and going to location scouting and like doing all these like proper kind of production work? I was like, this is suspicious. So I was looking it up, Googling him, Googling everything, and I'm okay, hey, there's no red flags. And
it all checks out.
All checks out, and then I was like, okay.
So with you then, for somebody, so you're like really kind of just getting into acting in many ways. What has it been like as somebody kind of, I guess during the internet age, you can look up casting calls, like what have you done to try to go from 0 to 1 here of now being in a couple films and being able to fly out to LA and meet people?
I did a lot of research. So basically, I always like looking things up. And so the idea I had was like, if I do acting, the one advice that I read online is it's show business, especially for film and TV. So I was thinking, if I'm not a great actor or something, at least I have to put all my skill points to the business side. So that maybe through there, once I get in, then I get booked, I get paid, and I can reinvest that into taking more acting classes to get better. Because I always thought like maybe acting was just like natural talent, but yes, there is. But you also have to like train.
There's control over your body is the instrument, and you need to find control over what it does.
So through that, through acting, I was able to like explore a lot about myself as well. And the one thing was I want to really kind of present Chinese culture in a way. Like doing like this short film, I wanted to be part of that kind of like movement, I guess, in a way.
So I think that this is something a lot of people forget in show business, is the other part of it. A lot of times people say the business and they're like, oh, that's a bad thing. But in many ways, I actually find it very liberating. Because it's like, there may be somebody who's just this amazing acting genius, and you're never gonna, like, if you get there, it's gonna be 20 years, and it's like, it's really hard. But one, there's not as many of those people as you think. And two, even if there are those people, there are many opportunities. And three, the good thing about it being a business, like any other business, if you're good to your clients and they're good to you, you can work together again. And so like you don't need to know 80 directors. You can have a good working relationship with a couple directors, and all of a sudden you find out like, oh, you kind of got more work than you need. So it's not like, oh, I need to know every major celebrity I've ever known, or else I can't make it in acting or creative work. I also just think acting in general is very useful for other things in life, like
it definitely helps, like not having nerves, just like being calm, just like being able to get on stage and just like you present.
It's your first podcast, you're not freaking out.
I'm not freaking out. And if I wasn't like doing acting, well, first of all, if I wasn't doing acting, I wouldn't even be here. But if I wasn't doing acting, I'd maybe be like, oh, a little intimidated, you know. and because I was like on the first short film, I was like, oh, it's my first one. I was like, oh.
Yeah. What was it like shooting your first ever film? Were you nervy?
Yeah. So my first ever short film was by these two guys, Minas and Jamal. And the funny thing was when I auditioned for them, afterwards when I got the role, again, I had to speak Cantonese. And I was actually very surprised that their script, that they chose Cantonese. They were, it's not a student film, but they were like independent, but they were like young, right? And I was surprised they used Cantonese because actually they got a lot of influence from Hong Kong triad film kind of thing, right? Cool. And so when I was on set, everything was so new to me. I was like, oh, this is like great. And I was a little bit nervous because I wasn't sure how to like, well, how should I be and things like that. But the one thing is like, eventually that nerves went away as you get more reps and things like that. And then, another funny trivia was then I found out they were from my high school. Oh, that's great. But they were like 4 or 5 grades below me, so we didn't like cross paths. But so that was cool. So through acting, I meet a bunch of diverse people, and they become like one of my good friends as well. And I met another good friend, Helen Wang. She was born in Shanghai, but she immigrated to like Toronto when she was like 5 or 6, and she's very knowledgeable about Chinese culture. She does like some calligraphy and stuff, and she's basically like a little younger sister to me. That's great. So through that, I managed to almost like connect with my roots more with acting, and then that allows me, again, when we're talking about like the objective of like being able to learn your language, is like now I have a reason to make sure I continue to learn Mandarin. Well, this is the big thing, is like all this other stuff. This is what I found as well. So many good things, interesting people, great experiences, motivation has come out of trying to create stuff. And either whether it's acting or putting on a podcast or whatever, you know, I never would have met you. Exactly. There's a lot of good stuff that comes with the creative stuff. And I wouldn't have reached out to Ike actually, because I knew him from my high school, but we only spoke maybe 10 minutes throughout our whole, because he was 2 grades below me. And we were still connected on Facebook, but I don't use Facebook anymore. But somehow we're still connected on LinkedIn. And then when I was doing acting, I saw that he was like, he's out here in LA now. Here. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I wasn't gonna contact him or anything. But when I was going for this film festival, I thought, let me just reach out to him. I don't know how he would respond either, right? So I was like, you know what, if he doesn't respond, that's cool. Like, you know, it'll be nice to catch up just to see how his life has been after high school. And then, I got to connect with him, and then he was like, hey, would you like to be on this podcast? And I was like, Jesse, yeah, I've seen this guy, you know, like he went viral. I saw on YouTube and everything, and now. That was funny. So you had seen me before you came here. Yes, I knew who you were. Oh, that's, wow. We had a fencer on a previous podcast as well that also had seen me before, and was like a fan of the channel, and I was like, I guess maybe the channel's working better. Yeah, you're big. You're big, man. Like, I'm a big T guy. And I've sent like your videos when I was like showing my friends, hey, this is what's happening. You know, here's this interview with all these other channels and stuff like that. So yeah, I knew who you were like in 2020. Like, yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, because you were saying you saw an interview I did on the BBC. Yeah, you said, right? Exactly. And I was like, finally, someone just presenting a different perspective of what's going on. I was just like very happy. And I was like, oh, finally someone like kind of like speaking, you know, because I didn't have a platform. I wasn't acting. I was just like, just watching. And then I used that to share to my other friends. Hey, you have a white guy who has experience in China saying all these things. And then I was interviewed over the pandemic a couple times, because especially in the earlier days of the pandemic, when it was kind of thought of like as Asian news story, before it had really gotten to the whole world. People ask what's going on in China, and I had lots of friends in China. I was checking on WeChat every day. It was always said on wacky. BBC, and it's like, and it was funny being on BBC, which is supposed to be this big news station. It was really shocking how they didn't have people who actually were like on top of what's actually going on in China at the moment. Obviously, it's hard. It's information getting in and out of China is difficult. It's difficult, but it's like. It was, and especially being a comedian too. It was always. I feel like it's useful to be able to bring a more people-to-people mindset onto the news, because oftentimes it's like, the inflation is up 2.1 points and Chinese currency manipulation is blah blah blah, and it's like, this is not what like regular people in China are thinking about, like, let's manipulate our currency. Like, no one says that in real life. It's just completely I wouldn't say it's made up, but it's like, it's a choice that news media makes to make international news about big things, as opposed to saying like,
what about somebody else who's also struggling right now?
Well, like, they need clicks, right? They need clickbait headlines.
But the thing is, the people works too. Like this, I mean, it's a little bit harder, but it's like I think it's just it's like the mechanization of the news. The 24-hour news cycle, the fact you have to fill up shows. I think one of the healthiest things, ironically, about social media is like, on one hand, I'm sure the internet wants as many videos as I'm willing to post because they don't pay for me to make the stuff. I pay to make the stuff, and then they get it for free. But on the other hand, it's like, if I don't have 24 hours of content, I don't need to pretend to have 24 hours of content. Like, I can spend, like, I make one video a day that might be 40 seconds. But if that's what I got for you, then I can that's all I got. And I don't need to pretend to make up 23 hours, 59 minutes, and
you don't have to milk the content in order to get,
Whereas like viewers. a lot of news places is essentially like they don't have resources to actually make 24 hours of news. They can kind of run a bunch of entertainment shows that look like news shows, but are actually essentially just entertainment shows.
Yeah, exactly.
And so to some degree, I almost feel like it's more intellectually honest to say you're an entertainment show that's talking about the world as opposed to pretending to be a news station. And there's nothing particular against the BBC or whatever, but it's like, this is kind of the feel as like this host who's sitting there and it looks like a news studio and this guy's wearing a suit and he has a British accent. But I'm like, you haven't researched this at all.
Right, exactly.
Like, like it's pretty scary that you actually need the guest to come on and talk about this stuff. Like, you're not ready to know what the situation on the ground is.
I just remember like back in like the early 2000s when Jon Stewart went on, I think it's called Crossfire.
Oh yeah, and then that was brilliant.
And then that's basically what you're saying now. It's like, just be, you're not. This is not a real debate show. This is not helping. It's really entertainment.
Which is fine to be an entertainment show, but don't like this. And I think that this is part of the reason why I think news shows have become less and less respected, and weirdly enough, comedy has been like more respected. Is that comedy, while it's not news, admits its own shortcomings. And it's like, hey, if I'm a dude, Jon Stewart was like, the show that goes before me is puppets making crank phone calls. Like that knowledge of what this situation is, and weirdly enough, it's something in the West, it's not often said, but the humility to be able to say, like, I can't bring you the news. I can bring you my take on this story.
Your perspective on this. And
that's how journalism started. That's what it was before it became a huge industry, was like individual journalists saying like, what can I get a hold of? And a lot of it also was not necessarily even like, they knew it wasn't necessarily true. They're like, this is what we got before the newspaper came out. But I think that's sort of, that's one of the things that's made it a little bit more difficult to do this intercultural exchange, is that because the formal news media just will not make a story about China that doesn't have clickbaitiness to it, but it also doesn't have the skill of being true entertainers. You wind up in this middle ground where like all the news about China is horrible, and they're kind of powerless to stop it from being horrible.
And it's not just China either. It's like other countries as well. Like every time you see like, we used to talk about Mexico, it's like this huge, different.
Mexico's a huge country, like, and the whole thing in America and the discourse is like the border. Well, that's not all that Mexican people think about. Is the border. So it's so I guess, do you feel then that like kind of acting for you is not just about, I want to kind of have fun and play, but it's also like there's like a responsibility I feel with it as well, like to present myself, and I would love to say like I could represent like, Chinese people, Canadian Chinese people, East Asian, Southeast Asian in general. But like, I know that I remember reading on one of your blogs, one of the interviews you said, like, you're a cultural ambassador. So I feel like I would need to, like, I want to present to the world, like what, like the positive aspects of like Chinese culture and even Canadian politeness and everything as well. And that's what I want to do, is just be a cultural ambassador for like Chinese Canadians, Canadian Chinese, throughout the world. And I realized that when I went to London 6 years ago, that's where I met my girlfriend in Italy, London, UK. And I noticed that people there, they were surprised. They're like,
they didn't think I was Chinese. I don't take offense to it. They're like, oh, are you Japanese or something? It's like never like Chinese. Or they think, are you mixed? I'm like, I think I look really Chinese. And that's when I realized, oh, they haven't been exposed to like Chinese people, at least like Canadian Chinese, because I'm like, they're like, oh, you're so tall. I'm like, I'm not that tall, right? And I was just like scratching my head. I was like, what is all this like compliments kind of coming from? And I think that their idea of Chinese people is the ones that work in Chinatown or something like that. And they're just not privy to all the knowledge of like Chinese Canadians or even Chinese Americans who are like basically like
assimilated,
assimilated, we're like normal, like,
So
so that's why I'm like, I need to for acting. I was like so when I did the first short film, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna post it all over. So that's the case where a lot of my friends don't know when I said in the very beginning is that I'm gonna post on social media. I'm gonna say this and this and this. And then eventually I realized, I realized that I was trying to get maybe a little bit of validation from other people, but then I realized there's a responsibility, there's actual art to everything that I didn't really have that thought going into it. So that's why I'm like, oh, I actually felt like I had imposter syndrome in a way. And I'm like, okay, I'm not, and I wasn't represented at the time. I wasn't in the union at the time. So I'm like, oh, this is actually kind of scary, like.
Tell people you're out making stuff.
I'm doing acting and stuff. And me knowing like the Chinese culture, so I'm like, what if I cannot represent my people well in a way? Not that they're asking me to be their ambassador either, but I know that when I travel, when I tell them I'm Chinese, I'm trying to also paint a different light when they think of like a Chinese person, right? And so that's when I realized, okay, maybe I should not post anything. So I'm nothing on for now anyways, on about acting. And when I'm ready, I will post like a final product. But like for now, just keep it quiet just to make sure I represent my people well. I'm not always spamming.
Well, I would say there's always a balance. I mean, I felt a very similar way in China, like being a white actor, Jewish actor, whatever, in like a Laowai actor in China.
Because I read that you said like you're going to think that all Americans, depending on how you
they're like, and it was also part of the roles I picked. Like I particularly didn't pick roles that were like, it shows Americans to just be straight up horrible people, badly written roles. I'm like, find somebody else to play that. It's not I think this is part of the reason why I really am more of a writer and creator and director at heart more than an actor. I love acting, but I feel like when I play characters that I just like, this isn't me. So let somebody else act it. It's not like it's a bad role. It's just I can't do that.
Exactly.
But in terms of the sharing thing, I think it's there are many ways to represent yourself and your community well. And I think one of those ways, incidentally, for Asian performers, I've seen a lot of friends who are Asian filmmakers, performers. I think that the Asian performers have a lot harder time saying like, I was in this cool thing. I'm doing like, I'm going out there. I'm like, what? Look at me. And I think it's not to say that you need to be spamming, but like the way you go about sharing yourself is also a form of ambassadorship.
Exactly.
So like to say, is it hard to kind of have the background that I have and tell people to look at me? Yes. But this is how I do it.
Exactly.
And so like, and then you kind of tie that knot where it was like, it was a struggle, but we came out the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
If you get caught in the struggle forever, you're also kind of missing out on that ambassadorship.
So that's why when I was getting new headshots,
my
headshot photographer was looking through my Instagram. He's like, you have nothing about acting. Well, first of all, my final, I was in Amazon Prime. I had like 2 lines, so that's good. It's going to be released soon, so I'm waiting to make sure I survive the edit. And then I'll post that as a final product. Write a small blurb, and then that's it. And he said that you have nothing about acting. Like, sometimes producers do look at your social media presence.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was like, really? And I was like, okay. But I know how to.
I would rephrase your thinking on this. It's not just because the thing about making a movie is, like you're here working on a film, like being part of a film that you shot 2 years ago. The life of being a creator is long and it's continuous. And so you can't wait for just the days when the movie comes out to be an actor. The way you go through the process is the story. For the tea thing, I can't just be like, hey, we have 3 new teas. And then people are like, oh, where'd you get it? Why does it come out? Like, people like seeing
kind of like the process
of how you find the thing, how you make the decisions. Like, hey guys, like I'm, not that you need to make content on it, but how, like, it was so important to you to do this project and there's another that's completely irrelevant to you. Why is that? That process of saying, you don't need to, spam all your friends, but like, if you have a page where you're sharing what you're acting, you can be like, why did I pick this piece? Why did I not do that? That thinking is also helping other actors who may be a step underneath you, who are just maybe even never gotten started because they haven't thought through some of the stuff you've already thought through just to get to the audition. So it's a lot of times it's like you never know what's going to be the thing that makes it work. So.
Those are good points. And another thing why I haven't really posted much was because I want to surprise my friends. So that's another aspect.
So that's the thing too. But I think that like once the cat's out of the bag.
Oh yeah, exactly. So the other thing is like because I want to surprise my friends because they didn't know. Some know I'm acting, but a lot don't. I want to surprise them when I'm like, hey, let's watch this TV series. Then they see.
Now you're playing the long game.
Yeah, really I've been playing for the past 2-3 years. And actually, I had a commercial that I did, and I was. And when it came out, they were like, "Are you an actor now?" I was like, "No, they just like they cast anybody."
Well, you think all the Asian people look alike?
Yeah, and that's what I said. I'm like, they're like, no, they're like, I was like, wait, just because he's Asian, so you think that's me?
And you're like, no, you're gaslighting all your friends.
Exactly. They're like, no, that's your hand, that's your mannerism. I know that's you.
Gotta be you.
And then I was like, oh damn, okay. And I was like, and they're like, are you an actor now, Jin? And are you a model now? I was like, no, they just hire anybody. But yeah, once I show a couple of friends the TV series I'm in, which should be releasing soon. I don't know when, but on Amazon Prime. Then I'm gonna record their reaction.
That'll be good.
And then that's like something for me, like memories. Those are like gonna be good. Like
that's great.
Yeah.
Well, best of luck with it. We're basically running out of time, but before I let you go, I have one last question to ask you, which is, what are the Chinese comedians making of the Drake-Kendrick beef?
Oh my God.
Because I heard a lot of Canadians' opinion, but the Chinese Canadians specifically, I don't know what they think about this beef.
Oh my goodness. So the Chinese Canadians, like my generation, it's tough because well, at least for me, I do support Drake because he brought Toronto so much publicity and marketing that when everywhere I travel before this beef happened, they're like, "Oh, you're from Toronto? Oh, sick. I want to go visit." And there was a restaurant in Chinatown called New Ho Qing, I guess shout out to New Ho Qing now, where Kendrick referenced that restaurant, and now it's super popular because they have like also a Kendrick special.
That's funny.
For me, I didn't like that because I'm like, yo, you need to support your boy.
You gotta be with Drake.
You gotta support your boy. Like make it a Drake special, or I don't know what they serve. Maybe the Kendrick special is some like garbage like dish. I don't know. If that's the case, then at least I have a little bit of respect for them, but. For the most part, it also made local Chinese news as well because they referenced New Ho Qing.
That's funny.
But for my friends, they were like, "Oh, now when we come to LA, we cannot wear not all my friends, but some of them were like, we cannot wear any OVO or like anything Toronto." But for me, I went to the Dodgers game yesterday. I wore my East York, which is the borough in Toronto. I wore my Blue Jays hat. I didn't even care, but no one bothered me anyways. I wore my Scarborough Shooting Stars t-shirt underneath. I was just like decked out in Toronto. But no one really, I feel like no one really cares, but it was like a fun, like my friends were all talking about it. They're all like, oh, like this is not good look for us. And then I was like, oh man. To me, I was like, at least we still have the weekend because he's from Scarborough, he's from Toronto. But it was, for that month, we did take an L. But now, after that, people are still gonna listen to Drake. People are still, and for us, like I feel like once it blows over, at the end of the day, who wins is them two. They get the money.
They've got a lot of publicity.
Free publicity. Yeah. So that's a good question. I can't believe you asked me that.
I was gonna say, I was like, especially now you being in LA, I was like, oh, can you go around with all the Drake? Don't be too loud about that in South Central, but it's great. I mean, everybody's, I think. Even amongst the beef, I think everybody has taken it with the right amount of seriousness.
I think so too. Not some, of course, some are like too serious. I'm like, they just live on the internet. But for the people who are like more in the middle, it's like, oh damn, that happened, and then next. But
this is how I know that Drake lost the fight. Is that I went to Canada and I was in Vancouver, and anybody asked about Drake, it's
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're like, we wanna support our boy, but like it wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah, but anyway, I was in China when that whole thing happened, so it was really funny.
Did it make the news?
Oh, it made the news immediately in China. Like everybody was talking, like as one video drops, and then all of my Chinese friends are sharing it, and they're like, oh, look at this one, look at that.
Damn, like, I didn't know it reached China.
Oh yeah, the beef reached China, and I remember watching this, and I was thinking like I should make some sort of like I was gonna make a joke about being in China and talking to somebody off screen, and the joke would be like J. Cole is here in China, avoiding the whole shit.
Yeah, because he
dipped, and then like everyone's like, "Where's J. Cole?" And the joke was going to be like, "Hey, J. Cole, like it's good to see you in Beijing. Like, why are you here?"
He got flack for that, and then afterwards, they're like, "Oh, he did a smart move by not being part of the beef."
Anyway, I don't think we've talked about rap on the show before, so this is fun. Anyway, we do have to get going. It's been great to have you here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Where can people follow you? Yeah.
I only have Instagram. It's the Overseas Jin, and I picked that because it's high Y. You know, high Y hard, so it's like high Y Jin. And also to plug the show that maybe I'll be in if I don't get edited out. It's on Amazon Prime Video. It's called Cruel Intentions.
Great.
I have just 2 lines on it, but it's a good start, and I'm very proud of that. So hopefully it survives the edit, and then you guys can see it.
That'd be great.
And then my friends will be able to see it, and then I can let them know that, hey, I'm an actor, you know?
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. It's great. So, well, I'm glad to have you, Jin, on. We've had all sorts of guests at various stages of their life and career and everything, but it's, you know, good tea people. I always like, it's a big, like, you know, green flag on a person whenever they really care about Chinese food. Like, if you dig into it, that's good. For people who are watching the show for the first time and made it to the end, thank you so much. If you don't know somehow, I do run an online tea shop. All of the stuff that we have on here, the tea pets, the teas. In the first half, we had Sister Eyes Everyday Red Tea. The second half, we had the 2010 Reserve, Duedo's 2010 Reserve Show Pu'er. All this stuff is on the site, and the best way you can support the channel is by getting really great tea for yourself. JessieChouse.com, we ship everywhere in the world. And depending on when this is open, our EU and UK warehouses might be open as well. They're planning on opening in November. So if you're in the EU and UK and you don't want to pay customs fees and you want like fast shipping, really good tea, we're really trying to change the game there. I've spent all year getting that ready, so I'm very excited for it. So. Thank you again so much for coming.
Thank you. Shout out to Toronto, Canada, and Torino, where my girlfriend lives. And
we got shout outs on shout outs. I'm Jesse.
And I'm Yi Jin.
I'll see you guys next week.
Cheers.